Everyone who exalts himself will be humbled. And everyone who humbles himself will be exalted. There's one common trait among pretty much all the saints, if you study them, and it's humility. Even they themselves will say over and over again, if you look at their writings, that humility plays a preeminent place in the pathway to discipleship. When Benedict, for example, St. Benedict was asked once, what were the top 3 virtues? And he said, humility, humility, humility. And the great St. Augustine says, the foundational virtue of all other virtues is humility. So it's worth for us to break this open a little. We've talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and we'll hear some more about it in the next few weeks of readings as well, to dive deeper into this understanding of what humility, because it's not a popular word. It's not a welcome word in society modern day. Like when you look at a leader, you don't tend to say, we want a humble leader. That's not what people aspire to. So, and that's because it's most associated with meekness, sort of a self-effacing meekness. And that's not what the true sense of the word means, humility. The root word of it, if you look at the etymology of it, comes from humus, which means earthy or one of clay. It's the same root word for humor and the same root word for human. We're to have a sense of humility, a sense of humor, is to have a sense that we're made from the earth. We are made from clay, that we're humble beginnings, that this is who we are. The different saints have different ways of referring to humility and how to do it. One of my most favorites is actually St. Ignatius of Loyola. St. Ignatius of Loyola, and it's most unusual, I need to explain it. He goes, is that we need to be instruments of God and to discern God's will in our life. That's the definition for him of humility, is to be an instrument of God and to do God's will. Now, in there is is hidden, and it's best explained by a metaphor or story. I don't know, when you were younger, did everyone ever call you a tool? No? Like, oh, don't be such a tool. Like, come on, like it was typically in the context. I was told this lots of times when I was younger. It's simply when you're trying to go out in a party, your friends trying to get you going to a party, and you're saying, no, I'm not, I'm going to go home. Oh, don't be such a tool paying your attention to your parents. Like it speaks of you're a tool, you're somebody else's minion. You're not making your own free decisions. That's the idea. If you're a tool, you can't do things on your own. You're somebody else's. Well, it's that sense of tool, of instrument that actually St. Ignatius is referring to, but that we're in the hand of God. That we're a tool or an instrument of God. Now, let's talk about this by breaking them. Let's take a hammer for a moment. A hammer is what? Just a piece of metal. It can be a sledgehammer, a huge hammer, or it can be a special shaped hammer, but it's a hammer. On its own, is it any good? But in the hand of an artisan, they can build a home. He'll use that hammer to nail. In the heart of an artist, sculpture can chip away at a block of marble and produce beautiful sculptures because it's in whose hand it is in. You see, what makes a tool useful is whose hand is it in? And this is the point, of course, what Ignatius is trying to make. We want to be in the hand of God. We want to allow God to use us, instrumentality, right? To be God's instrument to whatever God's purpose is. Now, for this purpose, it might be helpful to talk about it as a pencil for him. Let's consider ourselves being a pencil in the hand of God. And the hand of God will write with us a story, a poem, something beautiful if we allow him to use us as a pencil. And not to fight the Lord and say, no, I'm going to write this myself. And then all of a sudden, all we have is scribbles because we can't write. See, to allow ourselves to be in the hand of God is the ultimate definition of humility. It's the ultimate definition of discipleship, that I am God's instrument. See, St. Francis had that in mind when he wrote that prayer, Lord, let me be an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, you sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's discord, unity. Where there's doubt, faith. Where there's error, truth. Where there's sadness, let there be joy. Where there's darkness, light. You see, in the hand of God, when we're an instrument of God, God is the one who does the writing. Now, it may sound very easy, but that actually is hard because we have to let go of so much. We have to let go, not to say that we don't have our free will. We do have our free will, but I'm enabling God to use it for God's purpose. But that requires of us a couple of things. It requires of us to listen to God and to allow him to use us to do good as opposed to evil. Now, there's a part of this is that think of a pencil. A pencil can get dull. It can be, without the lead sharpened, it's useless. So our role in this is active. We have to sharpen our pencil, who we are. We have to do the work of discipleship. We have to be men and women, boys and girls, of prayer, where we learn to listen to God and allow God to take over and direct our lives. That becomes the work. That becomes and then the writing of what God does becomes our joy, because now we are seeing what God does with our lives, almost like an observer, but because we allow God what's happening. Now you might think to yourself, well, no, and the temptation in American society, because we want our own, use our free will, that it's, I'm the one in control. Right? That's what America is. So meekness, humility is not wanted because it's associated with meekness of being used. But here it requires of us to accept God's will, to know God's will, accept it, and allow it to happen in our lives. Now you might say to yourself, well, I'm not that bad. I don't do that. We allow things to move us, and it can move us to evil. Now, it may not be extraordinarily big evil, but we can, if we allow anger and frustration to move us, then we will say things that are hurtful and will do harm to others. That's allowing the evil one to write with us, as opposed to allowing the Lord to write with us. We had an extreme example of this week with that person in Minneapolis school. The anger, the confusion, the pain, whatever was going on in that person's life came in and they took it out by shooting children. Now that's at the hand of evil. There is no good that can come from that. Now those families of those children now have a choice, because now they're angry, now they've lost, now they have to make a decision. Will they be moved by anger and continue this cycle of violence, or will they allow God to move them and to forgiveness? And that, my friend, is hard work. That's what the choice for them is this week. And the same for all of us. Now, that's an extreme version. I get that. But we have to be men and women of peace, men and women of love. That requires of us to allow God, and to have the humility to allow God to use us like an instrument, like a tool, allows us to be the best version of ourselves. So today, the gospel is not about, yes, it's about social etiquette at a banquet, but that's not what Jesus, he was trying to use as a metaphor to get the attention, to be to be humble before God, to know our place and allow God to place us where he wants us to be. Whether at the top of the table, the lower of the table, it doesn't matter. I'm in God's hands. My friends, that's the work we come to every week. We come humbly, every one of us, equal at this table. Myself, you, all the same. Men and women, boys and girls, children of God, coming to the table to see the same thing, to receive what we promise to become, the body of Christ. Humble servants, humble tools in the hand of God.